Hello everyone, nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Julia. I am CEO at Unicorn Lab and I am happy to host this webinar for you today. Please let's start from the introduction. A Unicorn Lab team is passionate about entrepreneurship and innovations and venture capital industry. We have been engaged with startups and investors from different sectors for more than 5 years. And last year we created Biohacking Congress. Biohacking Congress is the international platform dedicated to furthering the advancement of biohacking, health optimization, longevity, as well as biotech, digital health, healthy, and ecological companies. It includes on-site industry events in the US and UK and international virtual events. This is also deal flow consulting for startup, corporations, and venture funds, and the community of leading industry experts. One of the purposes of Biohacking Congress is to promote beneficial cooperation between startups and investors, to fuel the growth and expansion of innovation, digital health, and biotech startups. We provide business development, and entrepreneurs have an opportunity to leverage our global community and resources to make their brand awareness, to have visibility for industry investors, and to raise money for their current venture. For investors, we provide resources to accelerate and facilitate their entire deal lifecycle, from sourcing good quality deal flow to helping them raise money for their portfolio companies, and also participating in our events for VCs and angel investors. It is a good opportunity to be heard by ecosystem, to hang out with fellow investors and cool entrepreneurs. And we are excited to help the brightest minds that solve the planet's biggest challenges through disruptive technologies, solutions, and make human life more ecological, healthy, and happy. Please join us on our mission. Feel free to ask me and my partner, Mick, if you have any questions. And today we are happy to host this virtual networking event, and we hope you will spend time with pleasure and profit. And the first part of our event will be panel discussion about innovations and investment in biotech, digital health industries. And our great speaker today, Scott Amyx, Joe Bhakdi, Bob Troia, David Chow, Bill Liao, and Nick Adams. Very soon, I will invite these great speakers to our virtual stage. Now, I just would like to tell you what to expect next. So the second part of our event will be dedicated to presentations of selected startups, Empiricus, Human Resolution Technologies, and Glycan Age. Each entrepreneur will have 10 minutes to pitch, which will be followed by Q&A session with invited investors. And we are happy to have such great investors with us today. You can see all of them now on the screen, but before their second part of our event, we will invite them to introduce themselves. So this will be at the next part. And we are proud to have such great funds with us today. Generally, we have more than 200 VCs and angel investors who invest in HealthTech and LongevityTech startups on different stages. And we also have a good number of great partners who support us on our mission. Here is just partners who supported this our virtual event, and we are grateful to them. And also today with us will be a good journalist, Tanvir Zafar. He is writer at Coin Codex and The Next Web. And during the discussion, please, guests, you can ask questions to our panelists. And now let's start this enlightening discussion. Bill, hello. Scott, nice to meet you. Thank you for being moderator at our not first event. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Julia. I appreciate it. I'm a man of very few words, and I think the amount of words that Julia just spoke in a few minutes is probably equivalent to what I usually say in a year. So I think you'll find that today's conversation is going to be very robust, but as far as what I'm going to say, it's going to be fairly short. Well, I'm very excited to have our panelists with us. So today we have Nick, Joe, David, Bill, and Bob. And maybe as a starting point, we can go ahead and start with brief introductions in that alpha order, starting with Nick.
Yes.
Sure. Great to see everybody. My name is Nick Adams. I'm managing partner at Differential Ventures here in New York. Very much a seed stage focused firm with primarily working in AI, machine learning, data science across all software industries.
Super. And Joe, please.
Hi, thanks Scott for moderating this, and Julia and Nick for putting it together. We really appreciate it. I'm the CEO of Quantgene. We are Santa Monica and Berlin, Germany based, and we are at the intersection of deep medical technology that we develop in the genomics and cancer detection space, and a premium preventative care system where we bring these technologies to self-care patients and hopefully build the future of medicine with it.
Terrific. And Dave, please.
Hi, my name is David Cao. I run F50. I also organize Silicon Valley Entrepreneurs, the largest entrepreneur organization in Silicon Valley. F50 invests primarily in earlier stage HealthTech companies. We invest 30 companies last few years. We have also organized F50 Global Capital Summit, Global Investor Conference in June 16 and 17. I'm also a partner of Honeywell Lake Ventures, is a new surgical device fund. We focus looking for using AI technologies to revolutionize international intelligent surgery.
All right, great. Thank you for that. Bill, please.
Hi, I'm Bill Liao. I'm a general partner at SOSV. Probably SOSV is not a venture firm that most people have heard of, but you almost certainly have heard of our accelerator programs, HAX, IndieBio, FoodX, China Accelerator. We are very heavily investing in medtech and biotech. Anything that's deep technology, there's a good chance that we have an investment in. We're one of the most prolific investors in the world in life sciences, and I'm one of the founders of the life sciences practice.
Terrific. And Bob, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bob Troia. I'm based here in New York City. I am a longtime entrepreneur, I guess a self-proclaimed biohacker. I've been involved in this space for many, many years. My background's in technology, and I have two companies going on. One is called OPTML, and the other is Awesome Labs, but both are really focused on this concept of data-driven personal optimization. So basically combining everything from big data to self-experimentation through AI, machine learning, and all of that to basically start figuring out ways to transform the way we do health coaching and things like that.
All right, super. Thank you for that, Bob. All right, so just to warm everyone up, I want to start with maybe sharing some funny stories in terms of working from home. I know we have a couple of teenagers in the house and a dog, and it's a madhouse. Behind the screen that you see, there is chaos happening at any given point. So I'm curious to know from the panelists, do you have any funny stories of maybe your pets that are ready to have you out of the house, or maybe kids that are starring in your Zoom meetings, or anything that's humorous to share?
It's very interesting because tomorrow I'm invited to a podcast about distance work, about remote work. Nice to hear these stories from you guys. Yeah, interesting. Do you have funny stories? I have, because I have my kid, 6 years old, with me, and sometimes she comes to interrupt me when she's tired to watch movies. So yeah, what funny stories do you have?
She has a very, very cute girl, but it's amazing how, like, okay, if you ask her to do something, she will just stay there, and as soon as time comes up and like your meeting is over, she'll just scream and just come inside of the Zoom meeting and like, okay, this is the end of the meeting, thank you guys. Kind of.
Well, my daughter does the same thing, except that she's 16 years old, so it's not as cute. Anybody else that want to share?
One of the things that I've noticed on our company team calls is that there are those people with young children at home and those people without. And those people without are saying things like, oh, I'm really catching up my reading and I've taken up juggling, and you know, in my downtime I've learned how to cook all these great things. And then there are people, the people with kids who are just basically,
That's great. That's a great story. Terrific. All right. One more story.
I give you all credit. I know if I had to be quarantined with other people for the last few months and who knows how much longer, I wouldn't be here. Somebody would have murdered me by now. So you guys are all doing great. Give you credit.
All right. Terrific. Well, thank you so much for just having fun with us here. So I'm going to start with a little bit more tailored questions for each and every one of you, starting with Nick. So Nick, my understanding is that Differential Ventures focuses on more the B2B, enterprise, fintech, and cybersecurity. So curious to know, how does HealthTech and BioTech fit into your focus?
The data part of it, really. I think we're at such an interesting time for what, how do I say this? Data has been collected for sure, but also still a long way to go in terms of how we collect it, how we clean it, how we standardize, normalize the data, and actually make it useful going forward for, you know, a lot of things that the people who are more plugged into like truly the healthcare world are going to make use of it. I think, you know, individual care and treatment is, you know, massive opportunity. So I think that's our primary thing is how can we just better collect, clean, analyze, and on the back end secure the data in this interesting healthcare world. And honestly, it comes with a lot of challenges that, you know, I'm sure we'll talk more about later. But that's really how we look at the market from our perspective.
Yeah, I think that's consistent with my research in terms of your portfolio, because many of them are AI enabled, such as Consortio, Data Bento, Data Bands, Pienzo, Nakri, Mona. Why is AI and ML so important for your team, aside from the data aspect?
It's a lot of our backgrounds, honestly. And I think, you know, so I came from the startup world before moving into venture capital 5 or 6 years ago and starting Differential 3 years ago. And all the companies I was with had a, you know, sort of evolved over time. Early on, I was with OPower back when big data was really still the cool new term. Company went public in 2014. And then I launched a natural language processing AI engine for a startup called Rage Frameworks that we later sold to Genpact. So it was my background, and I, you know, from a market perspective, thought we were kind of at the, if you think of a classic J curve in venture capital and startups. After I left Rage Frameworks in 2015, I felt like we were kind of going through and had seen the first wave of kind of irrational, but very hopeful, optimistic acquisitions in AI and machine learning. And frankly, we were kind of one of them, where we had a lot of cool data and a good message and some great customers, but there's a lot of, you know, Band-Aids and bubble gum on the back end holding that system together. So we were kind of looking for the next wave, like true AI, as compute processing became better, as the algorithms became better. And from there, I met my partner, David, who's a PhD in computer science from Stanford, one of the really founders behind the highly successful quantitative algorithms at Renaissance Technologies, which is the world's leading quantitative hedge fund. So I kind of had the market sales understanding, and David really had the technical background behind him, and that's how we paired together. So it's partially driven by us and where we think the market still is at in its nascency.
All right, terrific. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, thank you for that, Nick. I appreciate it. Joe, I just want to make sure I haven't forgotten you. We're going to get into your topic as we get into more of the granular discussion. So we will get back to you in just a few minutes. Let's move on to David. David, you founded SVE, which is a Silicon Valley entrepreneurial community. And I think I may have actually attended, if not even spoken at one of the Silicon Valley events there. So the question that I have for you is, how has SVE been instrumental in helping you to form F50 and its sister entities? And can you elaborate in terms of the Elevate program as well as the Investor Summits? and how you're leveraging that crowdsource for mentors, as well as leveraging the wisdom of the crowd.
Great question. It looks like impressed. Look at Scott, you did lots of homework, and you know my structure. You got all the name structures right. So about 13 years ago, 2008, I started a group, a tiny, small meetup called Silicon Valley Entrepreneurs. At that time, like 200 people. And now it grew to just the primary meetup, like 36,000, online, offline. Total, we have about 120,000, mostly Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and developers, small percentage of investors. The reason I started this community, because at that time, I was in my first company, had some challenges, and I decided, okay, I want to network with other entrepreneurs before I do another business. So this is going to be helpful. I think I really enjoy it and grew a lot last many years. In 2013, became the largest entrepreneur group in entire West Coast. In about 2016 or 15, become the largest meetup community in entire West Coast. So I started the F50 about 2014, means like almost 6-7 years later after I started as a Silicon Valley Entrepreneurs. At that time, the goal was pretty simple. We called F50 we call the Boys Club, the investor network. SV is the entrepreneur network. That was the intention. So F50 organized a couple of events. The most famous event, again, is the F50 Global Investor events. Last year, we hosted in Stanford and Palo Alto Country Club. Each one, we have about 300 to 400 investors spoke at our event. In the last few years, you can see pretty much all the major VCs from Andrews Horowitz, AE, Sequoia, they spoke at our event in the past. So what is the connection point? You can see there's one side, there's a very large number of very grassroots, we call dreamers, super early stage startups. The other side is a large investor network. We try to build some connection in between. We found some challenges because the investors does not want to network with the dreamers, means the startup are not ready. They call unselected startups. And so last year we started a program F50 Elevate. That's the reason you're asking. The reason behind the Elevate. Elevate is an instrument of selection process called highly select a group of founders in earlier stage. So we can present those startups and connect them with investors and our corporate partners worldwide. We just finished the cohort 1 end of last year, and due to pandemic, our cohort 2 is probably later. This year, health tech is our #1 sector. Last year, this year, we plan to make it health tech is the only sector for our event. We figured out that because of pandemic, we realized that our health tech system is not as strong as many people thought we are, although America is the richest country in the world, but we still face lots of health tech challenges. We want to support our entrepreneurs and investors to use the innovation and to improve health tech innovation so we can fight with the pandemic better.
All right, great. Thank you for that, David. And I know that you're also a partner at Honeywell Lake Ventures, which focuses on intelligent surgical devices. But I want you to just kind of hold on to that for just a few minutes. We'll come back to that in a second. So let's move on to Bill. Bill, my question for you is, you're part of an organization that's very interesting, right? If you could kind of give us a little bit more insight in terms of, and particularly Sean O'Sullivan, who's a GP at SOSV, and his M&A strategy of accelerators like Hex, IndieBio, FoodX, and China Accelerator to create this mass or critical mass or concentration of early stage startup deal flow. So the question is, how does this model reduce the beta risk through diversification while increasing the investment capital efficiency?
Okay. So one thing, it's not an M&A strategy. We founded all of these accelerators. Each of those accelerators is run by a general partner. And Sean, as the managing partner, managed to attract us all into the firm, at various times because of our passion for what we do. So, if you look at Hacks, Cyril and Duncan run Hacks. They're both GPs. Cyril founded Hacks. Duncan came in and rose through the ranks, but that was always funded by SOSV. we did the first accelerator in China Accelerator, which is still running to this day, and produces amazing returns. And what we saw was that there was an opportunity for a real VC to actually take an earlier stage input into the companies and de-risk them through what we know. So all of our GPs have been successful in business. You know, I co-founded a couple of unicorns and exited them. You know, Sean has had multiple public companies and exits. You know, we know how business works. We kept seeing companies that really, you know, if they'd had better advice earlier on, they would have been much better. And so our view is, to start with, was get as many companies to apply as possible, and then, you know, de-risk them. And then we realized that when the companies come together around a particular topic, there's a lot more value. And so HAX was the first pure hardware accelerator in the world. You know, IndieBio, you know, in its various forms, was the first pure biotech accelerator in the world. And by bringing those companies together where they're in the same field broadly, we were able to double down on the risk or the de-risking. And so it's not an approach where you diversify in the way people think. You diversify in the long game, but you focus on the winners. So you're trying to build a system that creates and then enhances and follows on into winners. And that can't happen if you don't have a VC firm actually running the accelerator. You see, we see so many times small accelerators pop up, the companies go through, and then they fall off the end of the accelerator and there's no funding. Whereas if you've got a VC that can actually participate in post-accelerator rounds, following its winners, developing a huge investor syndicate, that's amazing. And I mean, you know, last year we deployed about 50 million of our own money, and we had 800 million in addition to that come in from pretty much every VC you've ever heard of. You know, everything from Andreessen Horowitz through to Sequoia, through to you name it, they're there. That whole system is, you know, people talk about looking for unicorns. We're kind of a unicorn stud, and you know, we get the unicorns to race around a track for 3 months in our accelerators, and then we get lots of people to bid the winners.
So it takes a very almost a Darwinistic approach to the survival of the fittest, and it's a ranking model. And based on the ranking, then you can actually support. You have the facilities to actually support them in subsequent rounds for that growth and maturity. You've also founded
just on that, the Darwinian part is in the selection process.
Mm-hmm.
We have a super high success rate. We have many more winners come out of accelerators than most VCs see in a year. So the Darwinian part is really in that selection process. We get 5,000 applicants annually for, you know, 150 slots.
Yep, completely agree. And I'm familiar with some of the accelerators there. Let's talk about Rebel Bio, which is something that you founded personally. And you have startups such as Perfect Day, Pili, Hyacinth, BioSelection. What do you focus on specifically within this sector?
Our focus is on amazing teams that are getting the tech and the timing right. You know, the biotech angle is quite broad. They'll have similar problems. The general rules of VC still apply. You know, if the team doesn't work, forget about the product. If the product doesn't work, you know, that could be fixed. But if the timing is terrible, it's not going to work out. So you got to actually figure out all those 3 T's, and that's where your focus lies. Now, putting that in context of biotech and deep tech has assisted us to bring in the right mentors, the right investors, so that those companies can continue to get funded, and that success, you know, goes on into multiple rounds. But, you know, if you just look at the technology, for instance, you're going to make really bad choices.
Yep, good point. All right, so we're going to move on to Bob. Bob, looks like based on what I've looked at, looks like you're very passionate about biohacking and quantify self, to the point where you actually have your own website called Quantify Bob, where you actually document your own self-experiments across body, environment, tools, and data. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, the blog is really just an extension of my own sort of adventures I've been doing over the years. There's really no startup businessy thing coming out of that, as much as I've just been exposed to a pretty wide range of things that are out there, whether things that are coming from the lab, trying to get consumer adoption. I see the struggles from the entrepreneurial side. I see kind of, investors will come to me sometimes asking for me to vet something that maybe they're looking at that, like, is this really legit? Some of these technologies might seem a little bit kind of woo, we say, and sometimes it's a great idea, but it's a very small market, and so you get some false information in that, like something I might be the first person in line to buy doesn't mean it's going to reach a mainstream audience. But a lot of what I'm doing is, sharing my data, sharing my experimentation to hopefully show others how they can learn more about themselves as well.
Yeah. So can you share with us maybe an experiment that you've performed on yourself that was kind of profound, or maybe it was completely something that you did not expect?
Well, I mean, something that's getting really popular these days are the idea of looking at metabolic health. So looking at your glucose response to foods or ketones on the flip side. And, we thought about glucose meters being something just a diabetic would use because they, it's life or death. They don't keep things in control. But we realize now we can buy these affordable continuous glucose monitors that go on the back of your arm, run 24/7, and we collect data about ourselves nonstop. And you can see what happens while you're sleeping. You have one on, awesome. And it's sort of like this concept of learning, things that we couldn't even do 5 years ago very easily we can do now. And it gives us so much insights about what different foods, what effects they have on us, what happens while we're sleeping, what happens from stress, what happens from just other aspects of our lives. And, I think a lot of people get into biohacking, and really diet is sort of the low-hanging fruit of where they start making changes. But as you start to actually look at this data and you can quantify and show and even experiment to see what does positively or negatively affect you, you gain some really big insights. And that's something that, like, anyone today, some of those sensors require a prescription from a doctor, but there's some that are over the counter that anyone can start today. And you can just get a spreadsheet and just start logging some data, and you're on your way.
All right, terrific. Well, we're going to come back to OPTML and the live O2 oxygen training, as well as the NanoV cellular damage recovery once we get into deeper discussion. So thank you for that, Bob. Appreciate it. All right, so the next question is open to everyone. So the question is, how are exponential technology, whether it's ML, DL, CRISPR, how are these types of technologies enabling R&D and advancement that was not possible even, let's say, 10 years ago?
Well, it was a great example just there in the continuous glucose monitoring. For instance, somebody could get one of those monitors and they could take a carnosine supplement and see in real time what their blood sugar is doing. And there are several exponential technologies that make that technology work, including all of the AI that went into designing it so that the sensitivity is actually right. We look a lot at the very cutting edge, new drug design. We look at big data applications. Some of the most amazing things to me are repurposing of old drugs. For instance, as a company, My Personal Therapeutics, they take genes from your tumor and they put it into a fruit fly, and they do 400,000 experiments using huge combination of different already FDA approved drugs. And they'll find a drug cocktail that just kills your tumor, and more optimally than any individual chemotherapy. And because they're all FDA approved and it's done with oncologists, that treatment is here now. You could literally go pay your money and get treated with that system right now. You don't have to wait 20 years for the drug to be approved. It's the intersection of these exponential things with things we already know that I think is one of the most exciting areas.
And I think just to jump into that, it's not just one technology that's exponential. I think exactly as Bill said, we are living at a time where these things really come together, and there's an exponential or a squared function of these multiple technologies. from AI and ML, the actual algorithmic advancements, to very big data and the sources of that big data, for example, sequencing or advanced imaging, to software and the internet, which is a little underrated because we got used to it, but there's also tremendous things happening in interconnectivity and access to knowledge. So to just give you an example, when we are in the parts of our business is the cancer detection through cell-free DNA. And when we look at a blood sample, we are now able to sequence so deep that we can look at every individual copy of cell-free DNA in a sample. And that allows us to just give you an idea to sequence at 100,000x depth what we are looking at each location. And even 5 years ago, that would have been completely delusional, right? Completely impossible. Would have cost you, $2 million per sample, and we are now at $600 per sample. So it's it's just it was completely impossible even 5 years ago. And that means that the confluence of these things, once you have that data, let's assume you could have done that sequencing at that cost 5 years ago. You would have run into a cloud, problem, right? Right now we are using Amazon and Linode Cloud to process 6 billion data points per sample. That would have been also cost prohibitive 5 years ago. And then we have to store that data with Deep Glacier at Amazon. Then we have to apply advanced AI on it, which, we use PyTorch and all kinds of things, which were not where they are now. So everything we do in the cancer detection space, every single tech component would probably not have been possible even in 2015. And I think the big message here is not just in our specific cancer detection space, but in biotech and advanced healthcare in general, that we are really living in an unprecedented time in terms of pacing of innovation, and also especially from an investor point of view, things can become possible in 2021 or 2022 or 2023, which are completely possible now. And so I think it's a time where you really have to be on top of technology, find the best entrepreneurs, and also to Bill's and I think Nick's point, or Bob's point, teams and the ability to pivot fast and really develop deep tech at a vastly higher pace of innovation than 10 years ago is the key to building great companies in biotech and healthcare. That's what I'm totally convinced of. Like the speed of innovation and the potential innovation pace have just dramatically changed. And a lot of incumbents, like very large biotech companies, don't really get that yet and are not built to actually capitalize on that potential. So I'm very bullish, not just for our company, but for the whole space of healthcare and biotech. I think it's a time for disruptive innovation, but disruptive innovation requires disruptive entrepreneurs and teams. Otherwise, you can't leverage it. And so it will be a question, who are these teams across the spectrum? And I think they have tremendous potential once they crack that innovation code.
Right. So I want to hear from the other folks as well in terms of what their thoughts around latest trends as well as possibilities that's enabling longevity and higher quality of life.
Yeah, and I think these guys kind of hit the nail on the head. Right? We break it down into a couple different categories. One is, there's the big data part of it, and how do we collect and clean and analyze all the massive amounts of data that we have. But then also there's the big algorithm side of it. Are there areas like clinical trials where we actually have very limited data, where we can, from a traditional sense, where we can supplement that with other, tier 2, tier 3 type data and throw a massive algorithm at the problem to help expedite some of the findings and help drug companies, for example, make better business decisions. So really interested in that. Also, I think just, from a healthcare perspective, I think the US in particular, parts of the Western world are, from a medical perspective, very strong in reactive medicine, but not always as good in preventative care. And I think that will become much more pervasive in our culture and in our healthcare system. So, and then coming to just the pure VC, the data, how we look at things, we look across what's out there that can help diagnose better, faster, more accurately, treat in the same ways, especially We just ran a grant program for COVID-19 type companies to how can we quickly get to a treatment for this, which will probably potentially come faster than a vaccine will. And some of that is finding use cases of repurposed drugs or chemicals or compounds that have been out there before, and how might they work against COVID-19. But then also drug discovery, clinical trials, and then just the efficiency. We have a tremendous shortage of staff and properly trained people. I mean, in the entire healthcare system, never mind when we clog it with a global pandemic like we have recently. So how can we get more and more people, how can we get doctors, nurses, and the rest of the staff in hospitals and healthcare facilities to be able to treat more patients more effectively? So those are kind of the 4 categories that we really look at where the huge advances in AI, machine learning, and just data have come from recently.
Okay, great.
There's also a big intervention with robotics, for instance. Like, our company OpenTrons is deploying liquid handling robots left, right, and center that are cheap, that are fast, again, an exponential technology, and again, addressing where we have shortages.
Anybody else?
Well, okay, I can speak a little bit of longevity. Longevity is actually my favorite topic, one of them. So just tell a story. So last year I asked my daughter, what if you can live like 150 years? Would you like to say, no, Daddy, I don't want to live 150 years in the senior house, sick. So I asked a couple of my friends, nobody want to live longer than 100 years if living in this unhealthy condition. So with longevity, people expect a healthier quality of life. Now everybody want to live 200 years. Nobody want to live 100 years. So I believe that this society had invested lots of money in the treatment of disease. As just like Nick said, I use a more different way. It's called offensive technology or make body enhancement. How we can enhance the body to do longevity? There's lots of investment as well, not as much as the treatment part. I want to actually talk a little bit about the third option called lifestyle. We realize that people's lifespan and health actually affect many different things. Mainly lifestyle is one of the biggest component other than your gene. So for instance, most people do not realize that sleeping actually is changing people's lifespan and health and ability to work significantly, maybe like 10 times more than most people had ever imagined. So just one of the example, and your digestive system works. So lifestyles can change. There are lots of technology can be used to improve people's sleep, in people's digestion, in people's happiness, so they can live longer. I think this area is significantly under invested.
Yep, that's a great point, which brings me to Bob. Bob, if you could just go back into live O2 oxygen training and nano-V cellular damage recovery. We're curious to know how some of these things are producing the kind of biological signals to repair certain cell damage.
Well, there's a whole suite of modalities out there that they're not easily accessible to the average person. Either mainly cost is the main barrier, but if they're working their way into these specialized facilities, I have access to one here in New York City, or at least pre-pandemic. They call it Hack Fitness, where basically you're using solutions that don't rely on drugs or chemicals. It's using essentially like frequencies and light and magnetism and things like that are steeped in, there's a lot of scientific literature around them, but it's allowing the body to repair and recover quicker and better. Obviously, this is staying outside of health from a medical perspective, because you got to be careful with claims and things like that, but there's plenty of backing, supporting evidence there. But from a wellness perspective, it's, if you think about how you want to train efficiently, free up more time in your day, but then also on the recovery side, I think as you get older, especially, we talk about longevity, well, it's as much about recovery as it is about exercising all the time. Because if you're just beaten down and broken down, you need to get yourself built back up. And a lot of these tools, what they're allowing, especially if you live, like I live in New York City, not the best environment in terms of like air quality and all that. So you have all these stressors hitting you down all day, and you want to find these tools that are relatively they're pain-free, easy to use, don't take a lot of time, but you get a lot of value out of them. And so, I mean, we could spend hours talking through the science of how those things work, but I think the bigger thing to really talk about here is we've got these technologies and tools, and some of these are not cutting edge from the standpoint of the science goes back to like the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and stuff that was very fringy back then, but now there's data to validate what these things are doing. That's
a great point. Well, I want to go back to Joe. Joe, in terms of early detection and prevention, in terms of minimizing diseases, how is Quantgene's Griffin Deep Genomics platform using some of this precision sequencing that you referenced, as well as AI and other technologies, to be able to profile, cell-free DNA fragments?
Yeah, I mean, what we started to develop in 2015, but really took off on the sequencing side in the last couple of years, is, I think, maybe one of the most important insights in cancer detection of the last 50 years, that you can look at blood samples and detect circulating cell-free DNA fragments in the blood sample. And if you are able to achieve single molecule sequencing precision, meaning you can investigate every single copy, and you meet a second condition, you know exactly where to look at on the samples, on the DNA fragments, in terms of locations, because you can't do whole genome sequencing on that level of depth. Then in theory, you can identify variants that only occur or mostly occur in tumors. So basically you can pick, thousands of locations that you know are associated with tumor mutations, look at every single copy of cell-free DNA and try to see, is there anything in your blood that might stem from a tumor cell? And if that's the case, you have to quantify the entire thing and build historic data sets of that cell-free DNA from cancer patients and control patients and from different types of cancers, and then build a pretty complex AI system and data infrastructure to run a new sample against these historic patterns across basically millions and millions of data points, to see if your sample matches a pattern that was found in a early stage cancer patient. And that's basically the quick rundown. In order to do that, you have to build, that's, I think, interesting from a kind of strategic or investment perspective. You have to build a company that combines very different disciplines, from AI and data to really deep chemistry and laboratory expertise. Because you can't just be a data company, you also have to be a data generation company, right? You need to generate that data and generate that signal. And then you have to apply AI to it. And the combination of these two is normally not being done. Normally you are a lab company or diagnostics, or you are a big data and AI company. But you need to be both. Otherwise you have great AI and a bad signal, or great signal and no AI. And you need to combine these two capabilities.
Yeah, that's a great point, which brings me to your clinical feasibility trial. I believe that's underway. As of now, how many patient sample data do you have on the platform?
So it's a highly complex endeavor. We have a 10,000 patient trial ongoing. We have 5,500 collected blood samples, and we have close to 1,000 processed. So it's always lagging everything. It's an expensive exercise. We are collecting controls, so people who are not diagnosed with cancer, age matched and gender matched. And then we have 15 different cancer types, basically the top 15 cancers outside glioblastoma. Mostly early stage samples, as many as we can get, definitely over 50% stage 1 and 2 in most cases. And then you basically run that on our system. You have to run on our system because we need that very deep signal that you normally don't get out of sequencing. You have to do a lot of noise filtering and reduction. And then you have these silos or data sets of each cohort of cancer patients. And then you can start doing your machine learning, right? Which is a little more complex than just running a bunch of algorithms. You have to really understand, what's the signal here? How do you determine the features and the inputs? And then how do you make sure you find a good algorithm that allows you to do training sets, test sets, or leave one out methods to basically then say, do you have a predictive model across these 15 cancers where you run a new sample against these data sets, and the machine learning can determine what is the best match here in terms of cancer pattern. And that's just the first part. After that, you have to figure out, of course, the business model, which is a major big elephant in the room, right? Who pays for that? And you have to figure out medical compliance. So if you do too much machine learning and too much of a black box, you run into a compliance issue. because the way you can implement that in clinical practice is not through FDA. That's a big problem for other reasons. So you have to go through a clear process and then provide physicians with a decision support software. And there the FDA regulation or guidelines, draft guidelines, basically say the system needs to be fully transparent for the physician if they want to. Therefore, it can't have an ML black box. So neural nets, for example, are a big problem. So it's better to use more conventional machine learning. If you have a random forest, you might be able to kind of open it up and show, your little branches and leaves. Not sure if like a primary care physician will totally get it, but in theory, they can see all the underlying decisions that are being made. So it's multiple layers of complexity. That's very important.
Absolutely.
Tech is very cool and geeky, but once it comes to business, okay, what is your business model? Who's going to pay for it? Also, how are you medically and FDA compliant with this entire thing?
Yeah. I mean, clearly you guys are working on something very cutting edge. What you bring up a good point is who is going to actually pay? So even if you have early detection capabilities, will the insurers or the policies, would they actually allow for early prevention, including type of therapies that's going to prevent and minimize some of this potential cancer? And then the other aspect is the kind of the resistance or the pushback from the pharmaceuticals that benefit from, monetizing once you have cancer.
Yes. So I think that's probably the most crucial point besides the deep tech that we have. What is the business model and who's going to pay for it? We had a lot of discussions over the last 5 years, and we developed a very clear vision for the company. And that vision goes beyond our core tech right now. So to take a step back, what we see in biotech and healthcare is it's kind of a giant quarry of technology and opportunities all across the board, right? From bead-based imaging to stem cells to a lot of sequencing related things, and of course, cancer detection. Now, we constantly come across amazing technologies that then get totally hung up on the question who pays for it. It's always the same question. Okay, if you want Medicare to pay for it, which is the gating variable for getting to all the commercial insurers, you have this ridiculous requirement if you do something truly new and truly effective that you need from scratch clinical outcome studies, right? And just to give you guys, you're all finance guys, so like an idea what we are talking about, it's not peanuts. So in our case, to do a multi-cancer early detection system blood-based, the minimum cohort size that you need in order to prove that to Medicare clinical outcomes, not FDA, but Medicare, you need a 5-year study with full outcomes on 100,000 patients plus 100,000 controls. So we are talking about $1 to $2 billion and roughly 8 to 10 years running that entire operation before you get a payer decision. That's like, when you hear this first, you think it's a joke, but I tell you, it's absolutely no joke. It's like, you're not getting around that. And so we were confronted with that, and every single competitor that we have right now, which is not too many, but it's roughly 5 companies that are raised vastly more money than us, because for these reasons, we raised 13.13 million. The biggest one raised 2 billion for exactly that reason in Series A and B. So just so you understand what's going on here. We took a very different perspective on this whole problem. We said, this is ridiculous. You can't even iterate on your product. You can't even understand how physicians use it. That's all post your 2 billion spend in 2030, if you are lucky. So what we developed is we were very focused on tech. I think we have, in certain respects, tech leadership. We decided we are going to deploy that through a premium self-payer-based preventative care system. And that means we are deploying that with our own physicians or partner physicians. You pay $2,200 a year for that, or like whatever you want, but we recommend every year. We believe there are enough Americans who can afford that and who want to afford that. It's like $200 a month, basically $189 for a cancer detection system that is being provided to you through trained physicians who understand what that all means. And that solves a lot of problems. You have much higher margins. You can deploy today, like probably this year. We're very likely to launch something very soon. And here comes the economics. If we make that work in these, in the time necessary to show Medicare that it works, we make $3 billion. instead of spending 2 billion, you have a $5 billion gap, assuming that we make it all work, of course. But you have a $5 billion economics gap between these two pathways, because we can basically generate all that data through patients who pay for it, build our product, capture that self-payer market, and build our 200,000 cohort, with people who actually pay for it. And
yeah, I love the way you guys are literally hacking the system and thinking completely different path. And this is exactly a perfect segue to the question that I have, which is, there are some unique challenges to investing in pre-seed and seed rounds in these sectors that we're talking about that typically is very capital intensive. So given the fact that the survival rate of some of these startups in these kind of adjacent sectors, how does that compare to, let's say, the less capital intensive sectors like SaaS and e-commerce? And based on that, how do we rationalize the kinds of investment approach that we should take to investing into these potentially capital intensive sectors?
Can I just jump? Is it to me the question or to everyone?
It's for everyone, especially the VCs.
I can maybe jump in very quickly and then I let the VCs take over. But I think my quick answer to that is it's all about TAM, right? If you have a monopoly on early cancer detection, that's not a $10 billion or $100 billion market. It's very enormous. And I think that's always at the core of what we do, and what people like about disruptive, deep medical tech.
All right. Somebody else had a comment?
Yeah. So when I look at the market for early stage investment, I think there is a lot of what you might term low hanging fruit in that it's not as capital intensive as people imagine. A lot of our portfolio is not raising billions of dollars to get something into the market. We're raising far less money and we're getting much more traction. And even outside of our portfolio, I see amazing stuff. For instance, Dr. Greg Fay's work, where he's found a combination of 3 drugs that reverses the age of your thymus gland and therefore likely reverses the age of your immune system. Looking at things like Chronomics, which gives you all of your epigenetic data and has a big AI behind that. So you can actually see how your lifestyle changes your genes. These are not super expensive things, and yet they have outsized, results. And in the last 3 years, I've seen maybe 50 different unicorns that wouldn't require even $100 million worth of investment, whereas literally 5 years ago they would have required 100 million or more. And the big problem I see is that there's an arrogance among certain tech VCs that they think they know tech and therefore they know biotech. That's the difficult part, is assembling enough minds and intelligence so that you can go, well, actually that sounds like a great piece of technology, but no one is going to use it. I'll give you a quick example from COVID, right? There's lots of people wanting to do ventilators, and they're using the squeeze bag and some sort of device to squeeze the bag. If you talk to any anesthesiologist or anybody who's in primary lung care, they will tell you that putting on somebody on just a squeeze bag for more than an hour will kill them, right? You will overpressurize their lungs. There's no sensors in there. They will die from the squeeze bag treatment. And yet there are all these tech guys saying, well, a ventilator can't cost 30 grand. Well, no, maybe it doesn't actually cost 30 grand to make, because the margin isn't more than 30%. There's a whole bunch of sensors, a whole bunch of stuff that is, when it interfaces with the biology, you really have to know what you're doing.
So we have 3 minutes remaining, so I'm going to make sure that we allow for some of the attendees to ask some questions. So one question that's being posed here is regarding data consent. So it's about who owns the data, and then how are firms and startups obtaining that explicit data consent?
And this question is from one of our founders who will be pitching in just a couple minutes. It's Nuna Godinho from Empiricus.
Sure, I'll answer. At least on the consumer side of a lot of these, from the startup perspective, there has to be clear privacy policies, especially GDPR and other parts of the world. The challenge is where we're starting to build things where we're actually aggregating data from different sources. Where is that being warehoused? Who has access to that data? And so in the US on the medical side, we have things like HIPAA compliance and other rules. But if you're building something consumer facing, like let's just say I'm building some fun fitness app or something like that. I know some people are like pulling data in through, let's say, through Apple or Google, and they have their own policies on top of that. So you have to be very clear about who owns that data. And if a person doesn't want to use your service anymore, does that data get destroyed? Now, from a business standpoint, I know a lot of, like, I'm working on stuff right now, and the first thing some VCs came to me and said was like, oh, you're collecting a lot of data. There's gonna be a lot of value there. I was like, well, that's not the business model though. And they realized they're starting to think about how can you resell that and all that. And I have no problem monetizing that information as long as you can control it as a consumer. You control where your data goes, and you have to know where you're warehousing this sort of information. It's going to get worse and worse. I share all my data. I mean, I've been doing this for years, so I'm not necessarily going to put my raw genetic data up online. But things like if someone wants to look at how my sleep tracking and all of that, it's like, sure, no problem. But I do think we have to be very explicit with what we do and give the consumers control as to where it's used and how it gets destroyed, or they can own it and control it and put it somewhere they want.
All right.
I would absolutely, maybe if I can jump in for a second. I think for us as a company, it's very clear. In medical terms, data, deep genomics and all kinds of data is the most valuable data ever because it can save other people's lives. At the same time, it's also the most valuable to the patient or the member. So we make it crystal clear, if you do anything with us, your data is absolutely private, will never be shared or used in any way, unless you give explicit, you do an explicit agreement with us. So normally we ask people, can we use your data in clinical research in a de-identified manner? But I think it's super important to not do anything without explicit consent of the patient and collect consent written.
So I think on that note, I want to thank the panelists, Nick, Joe, David, and Bill and Bob for a robust and authentic conversation. And I'll pass it back to Julie and Mick.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Scott, and all our dear panelists. That was very interesting discussion, and I would prefer to have your discussion for a longer time, but we have to start our second part of the event. And let's remind presentations of selected startups. First startup will be Empiricals, then Human Resolution Technologies, and then Glycan Age. Each entrepreneur will have 10 minutes to pitch, which will be followed by a Q&A session with invited investors. Here is investors who were invited. And now let's have a short introduction of all these great investors. Mick, please help me to put all videos of investors together and to introduce all our investors. Oh, I see. So, Alan Brown already with us. Adam Dakin already with us. Hello, Adam. Nice to meet you. And who else? Okay, let's start from very short intros. Who already joined us. So, Alan, please introduce very shortly yourself, where you're from, and which fund you represent.
Okay, hi, my name is Alan Brown, and I'm a business architect at riverbanks.com. We help companies in deep tech industry to increase their revenue faster and remove bottlenecks that holding them back. Together with the Deep Knowledge Venture, we build neurotech.com, which is a market analysis company, and hub focusing specifically on neurotech industry. That's all. Thank you.
No, that's great. And also, please, Adam Dakin, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. Julia, appreciate it. Adam Dakin, Managing Director, DreamIt Health. We are a Philadelphia-based venture fund, about a $50 million fund. We focus on late seed and Series A health tech companies, primarily digital health and medical device companies. What's unique about us is we run a growth platform alongside of the venture fund. And that platform includes relationships with nearly 70 different payers, providers, large multinationals, big pharma partners. And that really helps our companies accelerate customer acquisition. And then we have relationships with close to 1,000 venture funds. About half of our companies will go on to raise an institutional round within 6 months of finishing the Dream It program. We're always looking for great startups, so look us up at dreamit.com or email me at adam@dreamit.com if you're interested in our health acceleration platform.
Just ask me and I can introduce. So next, please, Nehatana, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm calling in from the UK. I'm investment partner at Joyance Partners and Social Starts. We're pre-seed up to Series A in global investment fund, investing in the emerging science and technology of health and happiness. So for us, that is everything from life sciences to food and drink, water, education, and consumer goods, but all with a deep science or deep tech element associated with it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And next, please, Tony Kijakeku. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Tony. I'm a healthcare VC at VU Venture Partners. We're an accelerator program here. I'm on our healthcare team. I lead our healthcare division looking at different healthcare startups. We're looking to invest in 1 or 2 different healthcare startups this business quarter. And I usually look at around 10 to 15 different companies every week via Zoom meetings, and we're looking to invest. We invest between 100,000 and 500,000 in our seed round, and we're a $100 million fund. We keep most of our funding for our following on rounds, and yeah, that's about it. If anyone's interested in sharing deal flow, you could always shoot me an email, and I'll send you guys our top deals within other verticals as well, as in fintech, healthcare, prop tech, enterprise, consumer. Yeah.
I guess I will make a lot of introductions. Okay, thank you very much. And next, please, Camilo. Hello.
Sure. Thank you, Julia. I'm Camilo Bello. I'm based in Medellin, Colombia, down in Latin America. I am a principal at Veronorte. Veronorte is an investment management firm who specializes in managing corporate venture capital programs. That means that we partnered with very big corporations here in Latin America. Right now we have 3 different funds. I am responsible for one of them with one of the largest financial conglomerates. And we invest through fintech, insurtech, and healthtech. Our sweet spot is between Series B and Series C. And what is unique about us is that we not just bring money, but actually strong cooperation opportunities with our corporate partners.
Nice. That is very important to have cooperation with corporations. And next, please, Aileen Chan. Aileen, nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you all. Hi, this is Aileen from 13 Venture Box. I'm the head of strategic marketing for portfolio companies. So I manage and overlook a portfolio companies' marketing activities and strategy. So Venture Box is based in New York City. We are providing mainly revenue-based financing to consumer-based consumer brands, emerging consumer brands, but we are very interested in technology as well. And because of the recent pandemic, we're actively looking to invest in companies in healthcare. So yeah, very interested to hear all about the business pitch, and nice to meet all of you.
Thank you very much. Next, please, Helen Fredkin. Helen Fredkin. Hello.
Hi everyone. I'm Haley Fradkin. Nice to meet you all. I'm typically based in New York. Luckily escaped the city during the pandemic. So I'm currently dialing in from New England in New Hampshire. And I work at Plum Alley Investments, managing our, everything from deal flow origination to portfolio support, which we really emphasize. Our investment thesis encompasses a few things. Number one, we have a gender diversity investment thesis where we look for at least one female founder with equal equity representation on the cap table for all of our investments. Secondly, in terms of stage, we typically invest at the Series A and B level. And finally, in terms of industry, we look at both deep technology and frontier healthcare. Healthcare is about 30% of our portfolio, and we have exposure across diagnostics, therapeutics, regenerative medicine, companies growing bone from stem cells, medical devices, detecting things like heart disease, and CRISPR technology, diagnosing things like the coronavirus. So very interested in longevity as a theme, and excited to hear the presentations.
Thank you very much. Next, please, Irina Larina.
Hi, my name is Irina Lanin. I'm with VU Partners. I am located in New York City. You already heard Tony, who spoke a little bit about VU Partners. I am as well on the healthcare team here and leading some of the investments here and looking into deals in the healthcare space. Very excited to hear the pitches today, since the longevity space is definitely an area that is of high interest to me, and happy to collaborate and exchange a deal flow here as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, Rachel, please. Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Tenbrink. I'm a partner at 54 Ventures. We're a VC and also a startup studio, venture studio located here in New York. We focus very broadly on anything that's consumer-enabled tech. So it's everything from looking at new opportunities in supplements to coaching. We're very interested in the sleep space and healthcare space. So very interested in hearing the companies today.
Nice. And now please, Jim Gunton, please.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. Tech Council Ventures has been around for about 25 years. We invest in companies that are technology-centric in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. We manage about 130 million of capital, typically investing in companies of all different industries, but healthcare is a big part of what we've had success in, perhaps $2 to $3 million initially into any one opportunity.
Thank you. Next, please, Megan Cross. Hello, Megan.
Hi, everyone. Megan Cross. I am a partner at Amplify Her Ventures. We're a seed stage fund based in New York, investing in commerce, care, and connectivity with a big focus on IP in the health and wellness space. And we write seed stage checks occasionally, dip into Series A, fairly new, and just made our 23rd investment, having launched 2 years ago. It's fairly active. Oh, and our whole parameter and mission is to support exceptional women. So we invest in companies with both female founders as well as companies where we can bring our own network as female GPs to get more awesome women into the C-suite of high growth businesses.
One of our startups today will be presented by a female founder, so it's good. Thank you very much. And I think that we already introduced all investors who have joined us already. Maybe some investors will join us later, but we will connect all investors together for Q&A session right after first presentation of first startup. And now I see that Nuna Gadiva, founder of Empiricus, already with us. So please show your screen, make your presentation full screen, and introduce you and your startup, please, Empiricus. Good. Yes.
Thank you very much, Julia. First of all, thank you for the opportunity, and great to be at the event and speaking to all of you today. My name is Nuno Godinho. I'm founder with one of my partners, Ron Pruitt, of Empiricus, and basically this story actually started. We were both executives in GE, so we started by putting the U.S. Olympic Committee in the cloud when they wanted to go for the Sochi Olympics. After trying to use an EMR through to normal data lines, didn't work. So we placed the first EMR on the cloud, and from there we went. So Ron went into the Sochi Olympics, and saw that after that, when going and when we did the same for now the International Olympic Committee, we saw the value of having the US team 2 years using a system where everybody was on the same page. And there are some ideas generated, and that idea generated what today is Empiricus. And what I want to go with you today is really about this journey. Why did we decide to create Empiricus? What is the problem we are trying to solve, and what solution have we come up with? And so Empiricus, the first thing, our purpose is really to revolutionize the way healthcare is delivered. And this is a big word, revolutionize. And the reason is we believe there is a way, and as the previous panel was talking about, there's a lot of different ways in order to unleash the full potential, in this case for athletes and individuals, and enabling to live longer and healthier lives. Because as one of the panelists said, everybody is very interested in living longer if it's with the quality of life, or else then things get a little bit ugly. So that's really what we want to do. And so right now the problem is that the healthcare system is broken. Everything is scattered all around different providers. So there's parts of my information that is with a specific hospital or clinic. There's some others that are in some other place. There is no single pane of glass, and there is no communication. And what this makes is there is estimated of a 900 billion estimated annual cost in healthcare damages just because of that, because there's failure to communicate, and because there is not enough data, there is not one single place for data. You basically get inefficiencies, including you don't receive the best care pathway, your individualized best care pathway. And this is a big problem, because this is what, for example, is leading to the HHS ruling also, in order to get, okay, this needs to be in front and center. We need to bring the person to front and center to their health, because the more involved, the better it's going to get. So, but for that, we also need to talk about the health data ownership and the consent, because we all know that our data, when you don't pay for a platform, then you become the actual product, and you become your data is what is in the product. But is in healthcare, there's a lot of different data that is critical. And so it's important to have explicit consent, and that's one of the parts that we work very heavily in. And when we looked at the market, and just looking at the US market, the $31 billion marker with a CAGR of 6% just in US EMR market. And then 44% of consumers are already health engaged through devices and so on. So this is basically about 25 million individuals in terms that we could go with only athletes and students. And that's just from a perspective of potential growth. So what did we actually create? So our solution is looking at the fact that data is segregated everywhere, and there is no single source of that data which goes and has the patient in the center, gives them the ability to provide consent. That's exactly what we created. AI-powered, what we called health intelligence platform, because it provides both the patient at the center, but then practitioners, being that a physician, a physiotherapist, or anybody in the care team, very easy and secure way to collect, organize, and manage that personal health information based on the consent that is given. And also provide a single pane of glass, a single visual platform for all your data. So imagine you have your medical records, you would go put all your medical records in the platform, then connect your Fitbit, Garmin, whatever other device, Apple Watch that you use. And from there, now you have the ability to say, okay, I want to provide access to my physician on these elements. And from there, you're in direct contact. that's exactly what we built. So single pane of glass, all data from any format that goes through natural language processing or clinical natural language processing, because it analyzes first all the data in order to understand the severity, to understand what body region does it respect to, what body system does it respect to, and from there assign to the right one. So if you see here on the left side, this is how the visualization will look like, and I'll show you in a little bit in more detail what that is, and all based on data control. This is another visualization of the same information. So you have the lifeline, which is that visual representation over time. You have the ability to remote health manage all your data. So the ability to see all your data, including diagnostic imaging and everything, and at any point control the data. And what we built is a business model that provides both consumer, and so it's for the patient at the center, and so to manage all their data, but also enables to connect with healthcare providers and practitioners in order to go and say, okay, it makes it a lot easier to bring. So on the consumer, we have direct business to consumer channels, and we have partnerships with, for example, EMR companies in order to provide this as an overlaying on top of what they exist today, and provide things like an health index, which is also part of our patent. And we patented basically the whole process, the visual, the process of ingesting data, the process of processing the data, highlighting visualization. It's all, and one of the things is also our health index, which is based on a series of elements from your genomics, by your sleep, by your nutrition, by your hydration, your training, and so on. Multiple different elements create a readiness index, which is, or a health index, which is this number, the ability for the person to know, okay, am I going, what I'm doing is working, is not working. Of course, for that requires a lot of data. And so this is one of the critical parts. We're now in the process of funding round. And in terms of our strategy, we have a co-sell. So we are basically Microsoft Gold partners. It's the first time a startup has achieved that, because normally this is for companies the size of something like GE or Philips or so on. Because I previously worked in GE, both me and Ron, my partner, and I was part of the team that actually built and ideated Microsoft Azure and grew it from there, and then joined GE. And also in GE, Ron was responsible for the connection. We were able to get the backing of Microsoft, and that brings us co-branding, co-selling, and so all of their 70,000 global resellers, their account executives have us on their system in order to sell. And we also made partnerships with Wolters Kluwer, with Drift Brothers, which is connected with Red Bull in order to bring athletes in order to onboard. So that's basically our strategy. And basically we've gone through this process we achieved. So we went from a whiteboard to MVP in 3 months. Then we took basically 6 months to go into the private preview, in where we got all our early adopters, because the first one was a very small number of 15 people that we're using. Then we opened up for 350. Then we went for public preview, and we're now in GA with a commercial launch having happened in April 1st. We were shown in multiple reviews from Startup City, the cover story, as well as CIO Review, Startup City as sport, and CIO Review as in healthcare and sport techie. To finalize, we are not an EMR. We are not an athlete management system. We are actually the connection in between the two, because the problem is they are not they do not know what the others are working, and this makes that the data about how I train versus how my health is in two different sides. And so we are bringing all this together in a true SaaS solution in order to be able to deliver. And that is basically in order to keep the 10 minutes. That's basically us. And really what we're trying is to get the millions of individuals out there, every single person, to use a platform that is safe and enables them to see their data at any point and based on that, the consent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nuno. Mika, please put again all together. So I would like to point out that we have this startup to raise fund now, and if somebody of investors will be interested in getting more details about the deal, you can get details through our licensed broker-dealer partner and just email me and I will introduce you and provide you with more details about this deal. And now I guess we have some questions from our investors today. Would you like to ask something? I will be moderating a little bit. So who would like to ask a question to Nuno?
Hey, Nuno, it's Adam. I think it would be helpful if you would, I'm not crystal clear on what problem you're solving, and one way, what might be helpful is if you distill that into a very specific use case. So I don't know if, maybe bring that down to the level of an individual, an institution, and take us through the entire use case from how the user actually finds out about you to who actually pays for it.
Okay, so that's a great point. So let's imagine two scenarios, one in healthcare, the other one in sports. Let's start with the healthcare. One deal that we're going and working is with a large organization in which they have minute clinics, and what they're trying to do, their biggest problem is they have patients that come from multiple places, and so what they are having the issue in trying to understand is they don't have the full information. So there is no way to provide and know exactly what your
who is they. I want you to be really specific.
So let's say, for example, CVS, or let's put CVS and say, okay.
Who at CVS has this problem?
So who at CVS is the minute clinics, the administrator, and the doctor. So the doctor, for example, goes in, sees a patient, and they don't have all their medical history. There is no way without that medical history to go and see, I'm going to look at this, and this is connected with your history within your family, within some injury you had or some surgery. So that doesn't exist because that data is either on another medical center, or it's on another clinic, or it's within their insurance company. And so what we provide is the first part, is getting all that data in one place. So this now ends up being the person, the patient goes there and says, okay, I'm here, here's my medical record, and I give you access to this. And now you see, in a nutshell, as I was showing you, I see something, and I'm really quickly going to show because picture is worth 1,000 words. And I'm going and say, okay, this is my medical record. So now the physician is able, rather than going through pages and pages, is going to say, okay, what happened here? Okay, you have a fractured left clavicle. Okay, so what happened here? So it's immediately giving the ability for the physician to see everything that happened in your life, including DICOM images and so on. So this is something that does not exist at this point because everything is scattered. So that is one problem. From that, as you do this, what that generates is immediately the ability for that physician to prescribe medication, treatment that is individualized for that person. And to your last question is, who pays for this? So there is two models. In this case, CVS can go and say, I want this for all my minute clinics. And in that case, I buy a physician license, and that physician license gives you about 1,000 patients, or it can be the patient itself buying in for something like $9.95. You'll have access to all your data. You can put all your device data into it, and you can get AI augmented intelligence from that perspective. So that's basically the flow for the healthcare. For the sport, which is another area with which we've been doing. So imagine a team, any team. I'm from Portugal originally. I live in the UK. My team is Benfica. So the team goes and says, I want to now, during this COVID-19, I'm not protecting, I have no idea how my assets are doing, which is the player. So I go in, I buy this platform for my players. I get them to do daily status checks and to put all their data, and then I understand exactly how are they training. Are they training the right way? Are they doing the right thing? Are they feeling okay? Are they mentally okay? Because we also have a connection with mental health with a digital avatar. And so this way is now bringing the ability to measure and protect that athlete at any given point in time. And in that case it can be an individual, and we're talking with MLBPA, for example, NFLPA, to go directly at the athletes, but there's also teams because we have a team management part in the sports area also. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, dear entrepreneurs and investors, please let's remind that we have limited time. And now I would like to invite our next presenter, Greg, who is going to present Human Resolution Technology Startup. Greg, please show us your presentation.
Unmute. You can hear me now, I assume?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, good afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. My name is Greg O'Keefe, and I'm the founder of Human Resolution Technologies. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts. And before founding HRT, I founded a demand-side management company, an energy efficiency company called My Energy, which we sold to Nest, the smart thermostat company, in 2013. And then obviously that rolled into the Google acquisition of Nest in 2014. So I stuck around for a little while there. And after I left Nest, I decided to focus on healthcare, and ultimately settled on remote care as a need that was very underserved, and I thought that's where healthcare was going. So HRT is a 4-year-old technology company that focuses on customizable remote patient monitoring solutions for enterprise customers. So we'll dive right in now with a problem which is pretty obvious. It's fragmentation in the US healthcare system. And that system, because of that, is characterized by inefficiency and waste, and often fails to generate top quality outcomes. In fact, the last World Health Organization report, which ranked the various health systems around the world, 191 countries, the US was ranked 37th in terms of performance. That was behind other countries like Saudi Arabia, Cyprus, Costa Rica, Colombia, most of Europe. Number 1 was actually France. And that is despite the fact that the US ranked first in per capita healthcare spending. So how do we address this inefficient spending and poor performance? Well, we do it by designing and deploying scalable, personalized remote patient care with triage capabilities with FollowApp. FollowApp is a clinically proven platform as a service which gives enterprise customers a powerful means of managing different patient populations. It includes all the key features that you'd basically imagine are necessary for a remote physiologic or patient monitoring solution. There's a clinician-facing portal for remote patient monitoring and triage. There's a patient-facing mobile application available for both iOS and Android. We have the ability to conduct telehealth video appointments. And really importantly, all of the system architecture is HIPAA compliant and designed and documented according to the federal regulations which govern FDA clearance requirements, so that we're pretty unrestricted in the different ways we'll be able to take the platform in the future for different clinical applications. So it's a very powerful platform, but what do you do with that power? So it's important to understand what the whole system has to look like in order to achieve that goal of cost-effective delivery of quality care. So the system that we've designed is designed to maximize clinical efficiency, ensuring patients receive the care they need while reducing the cost to achieve that. So you start with the remote collection of the data. This gets fed into the follow-up engine, which uses AI to collect additional information from the patient depending on the type of flag that was generated by an abnormal reading. And from there, the triage protocol can start with a care coordinator who reaches out to the patient as the first human-to-human interaction, and then escalates care as may be necessary depending on a standardized protocol. And this is really important, the standardization of that protocol, to ensure the quality of the care is maintained at scale. So anyway, yeah, this is how we deliver care to the maximum number of patients in the most cost-effective way to the provider. Then, so that was a vision, right? And then COVID-19 happened. And so what I described before as an ideal scenario for healthcare under normal circumstances has suddenly become a model that's really required or necessary to ensure that patients continue receiving the care they used to get in person. And this is really illustrated fairly starkly here with 5,300 excess deaths in New York just in that 5-week period. And this is due to people not seeking out care for conditions that ultimately killed them. And what's crazy is that the number of strokes and heart attacks documented in that same window dropped dramatically, but obviously they didn't stop happening. So because of this, the value of remote care has become an industry-wide priority because it promotes safety for both clinicians and patients. It's convenient in the same way that this call is convenient, despite the fact that we're all holed up in our homes, except me, in the office where there is nobody else, so it's the same thing. And it improves cost by ensuring that patients who need care get the right kind of care sooner. So for us, the focus initially is on high-value cardiac patient populations, mainly heart failure management and acute surgical recovery. And I'm just going to use this slide to highlight the point that the platform that we've built is device agnostic, meaning that it's designed to integrate with pretty much any FDA-cleared connected device or service, and we can customize the types and frequency of the readings, the qualitative feedback, and other patient actions can all be assembled into care pathways for really any patient population. But keeping the focus now on the heart failure market opportunity, in the United States alone, there's a $6 billion addressable market just by looking at these class 2 and class 3 patients and about 3.4, 3.5 million patients in those categories. And that number is projected to grow by another 30% over the next decade. So I'm going to shift gears for a moment and kind of introduce you to the digital healthcare market and competition and where we fit into things. So I'm sure you've seen a number of these companies, but organizing them is difficult, and trying to explain to investors how we're different, from all these different companies is one of the challenges that I've had to address, and really any digital health technology company has to address. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to break this down into 4 groups: consumer and enterprise plays, and unregulated and regulated groups or products. So consumer products in this bottom half and their marketing budgets typically dominate the headlines. And that's a really busy space where the patient experience is just critical. It's totally central to what they offer. But then you have companies that focus on enterprise sales, and the clinical workflow is the focus in those companies. So narrowing in on the group that we fall in with, we've built the patient experience of a consumer product and integrated it with the clinical experience necessary for deployment with enterprise users. And our regulatory compliance strategy, which has been in place from day one, gives us a huge leg up over the competition because it's very costly and very time consuming to build that way. But it opens up a huge amount of clinical flexibility as new technologies and AI algorithms enter the picture down the line. Now, most of you guys are familiar, I would imagine by now, with Teladoc. They are now a $14 billion market cap company that facilitates video appointments with physicians. And this slide, I just wanted to highlight to give you a sense of the scale of this market for remote visits. In 2017, there were 883 office visits. And if you compare that to last year's Teladoc 6 million facilitated visits, they have less than 1% of the total market for these types of visits. Not to say that they can replace all of them, but there's a huge opportunity for other companies to enter the picture. And unlike them, follow-up virtual visits enable physiologic data to be collected and transmitted in real time, which obviously enhances the patient and the clinician experience. So even going beyond that, with features I listed early on, customization, device selection, quality control, streamlining EMR integrations, and future functionality, we also have a growing IP portfolio, including one pulmonary function testing device, which we just got the patent for and is rather timely given the pulmonary pandemic we're dealing with. And, but I do want to highlight that we're not a hardware company. We're a technology company that happens to have proprietary devices that do separate us from the competitors. So what is our plan? Well, we just won a contract that it should be about $350,000 with UCLA Medical Center, where we displaced the incumbent RPM provider following a clinical study that we just wrapped up. And on the heels of that study, our go-to-market strategy all along has been to work with companies that have existing relationships with providers that are now looking to implement RPM. So I'm just going to run through quickly the team that you're investing in. We've got our healthcare system architect, CTO Mark Seelig over here. Steve Thompson's the chairman of our board, very engaged. He's got 30 years of experience with Brigham and Women's Hospital, Johns Hopkins Medicine. David DeForest Keys, over here top left, is our chief commercial officer, building all of the relationships that I just flashed on that screen previously. Wayne Isom is our chief medical officer. He was the chief surgeon at New York Presbyterian Hospital for 30 years. And he trained the guy next to him, Steve Leahy, who is working with me now on a grant that is twice as big as the Series A we're applying for with the NIH, because we've also customized the platform to be used with COVID-19 response and investigation into the human physiologic response of the disease. And so just wrapping up here, our Series A opportunity, we're raising a $5 million round. Need a lead, targeting $1.5 million to $2 million, and the 2 to 3 million follow on, or 3 to 4 million, depending on what the lead looks like, we have queued up. So with the capital deployment, focusing on those initial deployments with UCLA Medical Center and those channel partners, dedicating a little bit more into our R&D operation, and obviously expanding the tech team for data analytics and machine learning as we collect more data over the next few months. And with that, I'm probably a minute over, and I'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, thank you very much to being in time, almost in time. So, dear investors, would you like to ask any questions to Greg?
Well, I would like to take the opportunity. Cool, Greg, this is Camilo, a very compelling startup that you have created so far. I was wondering, I'm pretty much familiarized with this thing of that chronic condition need to be an ongoing monitoring and these kind of things. But I was wondering, how do you actually work with your customers, health providers or health plans, to identify those who need this specific service? Because it's just to have a greater impact.
So actually, it's a really good question, and it wouldn't be immediately obvious that offering this kind of a platform to every patient makes sense, because as soon as you understand that there are patients in your, that you're responsible for who won't engage with this kind of platform, it gives you a very important insight into the kind of care that you actually need to be providing them. And so that could either be a guidance for more frequent office visits, or using a visiting nurse with them rather than depending on them to submit their own data. So there's a value in even in patients who don't engage with this kind of a platform from the clinical perspective. Now, as far as identifying the patients for whom it's the best fit, it's actually a fairly large subset of them, because the platform has been designed to be so easy to use that I didn't have time, obviously, for a demo. I'd be happy to give you one if you'd like to chat more. But that a lot of the patients who we just did the UCLA clinical study with were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we had like 92% of those patients were engaging with the platform daily, and 80% of the scheduled readings were taken. So patient engagement has not been an issue with our system.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure. So I have a question in terms of how do you onboard the existing devices, like a blood sugar measurement device or a blood pressure device? Like, what's this onboarding experience of all the devices that a patient has into your app, and how that is connected?
Yeah, so two options. So for the most part, the patients are issued a kit of devices, which, again, it doesn't matter which, sorry, let's just keep it focused. The kits of devices, the devices are already paired with the app. So there's no pairing or device-specific onboarding that's necessary. For patients who are bringing their own devices to the mix, we can do one of two things. There are third-party APIs that you can interface with to connect and pull their data, or we can just do a bring your own device manual entry piece, which for COVID-19 is actually one of them, since we're not going to be issuing thermometers to everyone on Earth, but obviously temperature is an important piece.
Yeah. Okay. And basically, you have already built the relationships to the existing devices, or to the companies of the existing devices, so that you're able to bring aboard like a large amount of those. Yeah.
Yeah. It used to be a better, a more that question applied more like 3 years ago, when device companies were trying to have proprietary Bluetooth connections so that you could only use your app with their device. But as the devices became more commoditized, most of the companies, including Omron, have opened up their Bluetooth APIs, so you could connect with any of them now.
Okay.
For the most part, and if you can't, then steer clear of that company, because they're probably not going to survive.
Yeah, it's good for you, for your startup. Okay, thank you very much, Greg. And now, please, Nicolina, I invite you to introduce yourself and your startup, legal names.
Hello, hi everyone.
Nicolina is a successful serial entrepreneur. Yeah.
I'm lucky that you have introduced me, Julia. So I'm calling in from London. I'm CEO of Glycanate, and we're the first glycan-based marker for biological age. So what is the problem we're addressing? The problem with standard diagnostics today is that we detect problems far too late, and chronic conditions such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, autoimmune conditions start far earlier than these markers enable us to see, meaning there is a lack of early warning. So glycans are your early warning. We measure a type of low-grade systematic inflammation that changes with age. In this graph, you'll see a presentation of free glycans and how they change with age. G0 is pro-inflammatory, and it would increase as you age. G2 and cellulation are anti-inflammatory, and they would drop as you age, particularly G2 for women going through menopause, they have a very sharp drop. And you have a link to a study here that shows increased increased glycoside correlates with every known factor in healthy lifestyle, like high BMI, triglycerides, insulin, so forth. So glycans, you probably never heard of glycans before, but they're a very important component of your biology. They're the fourth component of a cell, and every single living cell has a thick coating of glycans around it, and they regulate a variety of processes, including immunity. So not just that they are biomarkers, but they're also functional effectors of cardiometabolic and inflammatory diseases, and you have some links for studies that support this. So glycan age gives a benchmark for your health. We do it from a simple blood test that could be sent, like a box that's sent to your home, and you can do it at home and post it back to us. We deliver the results on your mobile or desktop app, and then schedule a follow-on consultation with one of our preventive specialists who give you advice for lifestyle interventions. So at the moment, we only give lifestyle advice. So what we realized very early on, there is far and few good preventive specialists out there and preventing program. We come from a research lab, so we always start with research. And we did studies with a bunch of them, and some of them would not come back as good as we believe. And there's a lot of myths out there of what's good for us, like following a certain gym routine, or not everything works that's claimed to be working. So we're developing a scoring system for our practitioners as well, which would be the amount of biological years they reduce for our clients. And it will be a type of marketplace for preventive specialists, like from clinicians to nutritionists, sports scientists, so forth. So we operate within the wellness economy. We're looking to sell to people who are well. This market comprises of prevention and personalized medicine, and weight loss, healthy eating, and others. We fit into the progressive type quite well, and we've had a study published 2 weeks ago that looked at diet and weight loss, and we can reverse biological age with this type of intervention really well. So we're hoping to penetrate this market quite soon. So our business model is a subscription, and this is what we have displayed on our website at the moment. The client can choose to modify the amount of tests he does per year based on what he needs. And with the test, you get a free specialist consultation, and then follow-ons would be paid for, and we take a fee from it. We operate within this consumer health market, and we don't have any direct competitors who are glycan-based, but there are market alternatives. For example, Amyx or Simon, which look at epigenetic-based biological age. If you would compare them, they would give you a type of information, so an epigenetic readout, while we would be the effectors, the actual driver of a change. So if you would put this into a study, there is like an epigenetic study that looked at medical intervention with growth hormone and metformin, and within a year of intervention, they had an average of 1.2 years reduction in biological age. While if you look at some of our studies, well, let's say for the diet one, within a couple of months, you could see a reduction of 5 to 7 years with a medical intervention, with a gastric bypass, and a person reduced 30 years in biological age within a couple of months. So if you want to quantify the effects of your intervention, we're a very good market. So we came from a private research lab called Genus. Genus is a world leader in high throughput glycomics, meaning we're the only lab in the world that can handle volume and that can scale this type of product commercially. Genus received over 20 million in EU research funding. To date, they've published over 120 scientific publications, and they've helped build our baseline of 80,000 samples. And we have phenomenal support from the 40+ scientists. So at the moment, we're on this innovation cycle. So we started with the scientific community. There's over 10,000 glycan age tests used in scientific research. We're penetrating this commercial market of preventive clinics, so early adopters, longevity clinics, and a little bit of the consumer market with biohackers. So these are people who are happy to pay for the test as is because they have their own intervention and they want to quantify the effects of this intervention. The next hurdle or the next market would be like the early majority, which would be people who are currently proactive about their health. So they're following a specific diet, they're in a weight loss regime, they're following an exercise program, and they need a little more guidance. So they expect to follow on after the test. And then the second market would be the late majority, which are people who actually need to be doing something about their health, but they're not doing anything at the moment. And we have a bunch of those clients as well, particularly because they're family members. So this is a sample of 3 of our anonymous clients. One of them is a financial services guy. He came back with quite a high result. Then he took some dietary improvement, and he managed to reduce 9 years in biological age over a year. And then we have an IT specialist here who's also an amateur athlete and does a lot of competitive sports. She measured 3 times during her competing 1 year, and then measured 1.5 years later as she was going through menopause and had a sharp increase, and is currently considered HRT. And then we have a really healthy scientist here. She wanted to further improve her health, so she undertook a nutritional venture and reversed 7 years. Here we have also 2 very different people. So you have on one side a yoga teacher who meditates 2.5 hours a day, doesn't take any medication, rarely a B-complex supplement. He does yoga 5 times a week, moderate intensity, and has been vegetarian for 25 years and is biologically 20, which is an anomaly. And then we have a medical professional who's been taking growth hormone and testosterone for 20 plus years. He takes a number of longevity supplements and has also quite a healthy lifestyle, and he has also quite a similarly good result. So how you get to the end goal can vary. It's your choice. So we've launched our subscription model this January. So we have some early revenue, which is about 9,000 in the last 4 months. So we had a couple of sales during this call, so it's gone up a little bit. And I've hugely underestimated ourselves here, but without any changes or further investment, we'll probably get to about 122. So we have a validated test, and now we're working on developing this follow-on program that will come with the test. We've launched our knowledge hub already, which is popularizing our science. We're launching this marketplace with the preventive consultants that are doing well, and we're looking to move into mobile data collection, and then data sets for lifestyle influences, and then hopefully medical by 2022. So this is also a real person. You will notice that we all, I guess it says there should be a balance of these 4 things, but actually it's quite the opposite. Some people can do a lot with stress and sleep, but not have a lot of effect. For this person, his biggest effect is diet. So he has to be this poor monkey on caloric restriction to get down his biological age. So we are a family team. My father is the founder and owner of Genos, and they helped create a methodology, and they led to our IP. Philip has a software development company and with 10 developers, and they've been developing all of our technology to date. And I've run several startups in the field of SaaS, travel, and properly scaling them to a couple million in revenue without any outside capital. We have Maria on product development on the lab side, and we have Zori in operations on the commercial side. We have a great team of scientific advisors, including Tim Spector from King's College, who's worked on Twins UK. We do a lot of research with him, but he's also been an active entrepreneur in the last few years. A month ago, he's launched with his team at Zoe, launched a COVID symptom tracking app that gathered 2.5 million users within a couple of weeks. We have Ronald from Johns Hopkins, and we have Christian helping with our digital marketing. So we're looking for 18 months financing to deliver on product milestones, reach 5,400 subscribers, and save them 37,800 years in biological age. I hope you can notice we've done quite a lot to date without any external funding. So everything was financed ourselves. Philip financed our technology, Gordon our research, and RRP, and I'll finance all of our logistical, marketing, and so forth expenditure to date. And that's it. That's it from me.
Thank you, Nicolina. And please, dear investors, would you like to ask any questions?
Yeah, actually, this is Jim Gunton of Tech Council Ventures. Nicolina, I think, is a very compelling topic or focus that you have, and certainly very interested to hear more. I guess one of the questions that I was curious about is, this reflects somebody's biologic age in terms of the glycan, but are there some inferences that, or are there implications then that you can draw about your heart age, your cardiovascular age or health, your neurologic, your orthopedic? Are there some subsystem implications that this offers?
So it gives you a type of, it's basically the underlying driver. So this, we call it low-grade chronic systematic inflammation. It wouldn't be specific, so we would see like a high jump when something is happening in the background, but we couldn't say specifically this is it. But if it was combined with some other parameters, or let's say already, well, so we did quite a lot of, I'll share a bit later on our research on cardiovascular and diabetes, which you'll probably find interesting, because we correlated to the AHA score, and you know, it was in some cases more predictive than all the markers combined. But this is on the scientific side, future development for more medical direction. So this is about 2 years down the line now.
I see. Thank you.
Nicolina, do you mind just sharing a little bit more about, or just clarifying what exactly the core IP is here? Because you mentioned leveraging some of the great work from other companies into the test itself, and then you have great developers on your team. Just between the science and the tech, what the core IP is.
Okay, so we have a registered patent on our methodology, which is EU and US patent. So this is something to discuss more in private, but we're happy to put this transfer this to glycan age. In terms of all the technology for everything that's done in terms of like a dashboard and stuff like that, we see that can be owned by glycan age as well. I think and also a huge asset is this baseline of samples, which comes from the research lab, which we're utilizing in the data sets that we can display. And another big factor is their know-how. So it's something that we can't what do you call it? Well, it will help us, let's say, set up a US lab in about a year or 2 times, a year or 2 years time, and help us kind of put all those systems and processes in place there, because at the moment the only lab is with Gina.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have some more time for 1 or 2 questions more.
I can ask something?
Yeah, Alan, go ahead.
Yeah. I want to ask, what is the accuracy rate? What is the accuracy of the measurement? I mean, like, I know from overclock and DNA age, it was like 2.5 years. So the accuracy rate will determine how fast, how often people will do the retention of the customers. So how much is it?
Yeah, just to explain how we discovered this as a biological age. So we found out that with using glycans, we can predict somebody's chronological age with a 9-year plus minus error margin. And then when we looked into this error margin, so when we looked into this data, delta, we could see that it correlates with every known factor of an unhealthy lifestyle. So this is when we define this as a biological age. Now, the error margin that we put in your report, we say that it's plus minus 5 years. due to sample storage, temperature control and so forth. But we are in the lab, we actually got that down to ±1 year. So when you retest, you can see a ±1 year change, and it's going to be more accurate for time.
So this means that every year the person can do the test. So it's enough for
Not
per
just,
year.
yeah.
It's good. Okay. Good.
Yeah, not just every year, every few months. And another thing for Horvath's clock, the biggest problem with Horvath's clock is that it would really measure, it's most accurate in predicting chronological age. And this is why he's also working on this grim age, if you've heard of it now, because he realized that the first clock needs a bit more to it.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you all investors and all who have joined us today. I hope you had a good time with us. And we had feedback from one of their guests today that we have more investors and entrepreneurs more than guests. So it's good feedback. Thank you very much, because actually this event is networking event for investors and entrepreneurs and experts of the industry. And here we select startups and discuss technologies and solutions in biotech and digital health industry. But also we will host one more big virtual event. It will be Biohacking Congress, our main format of events for wide audience. They will be the 5 hours event with a lot of great speakers, experienced biohackers, scientists, authors of bestsellers, and experts on healthy sleep, healthy mind, and fitness explorers, and so on. And we invite you to join us. There you can get acquainted with a lot of specific information how to achieve a harmonious combination of the capability of human body and the technologies in this area. So please join us on July 17th. I will invite you personally and provide with the link to our event. And thank you again for joining us. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Come join us.
Julia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.